Welcome to the dark heart of Appalachia, where whispers in the woods don't always stay behind when you leave. Some say the forest watches, others say it follows, and sometimes something deep within those mountains decides you're the one it wants. Don't forget to subscribe for more chilling mysteries. Now let's take a look.
So we're in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains visiting my grandparents. If you know anything about that mountain range. If you don't know, all you gotta do is search mimic. They'll come up. So speaking of mimics, my mom and I are visiting my grandparents, and my aunt and my cousin live with them as well. While we were staying there, we were staying in the basement, which is also where my aunt's room is, and then there's a bathroom. And then my grandparents' room and office is upstairs, and I think my cousin's is too. So I wake up, go to the bathroom, I'm walking past my aunt's room, and I see my grandpa, and I say, "Hi, Grandpa," wearing jeans and a flannel, like looks completely normal. He doesn't say anything back to me, which doesn't surprise me because he's hard of hearing, so it wouldn't be shocking that I would say hi and he wouldn't say hi back. I go upstairs and he walks in from the other side of the house. And I was like, were you downstairs earlier this morning? And he's like, "No, not at all." I go back and forth with him a little bit because I'm like, maybe he went down there and he just doesn't remember. It literally got to the point where my mom was like, "Anna, stop. He has not been down there." When I tell you I did not speak until we got literally all packed up out of the house. We were 45 minutes away in the car, and that's when I said, "Do you know if their house is haunted?" So my mom had me call my aunt who lives there. She also sees ghosts like regularly. Talks to them like the whole nine. So if it was haunted, she would know. So I text her and I told her, like, is it haunted? She's like, "Well, what did you see?" So I explained the whole thing to her. She sends me screenshots of my cousin's friend from like 4 months in, like, before this happened, sending her a detailed description of the exact ghost I saw wearing the same outfit. And okay, that scared me because that was the most human ghost that I've ever seen in my life. Like, it had feet, it had clothes, like it looked like a person.
I don't usually write stuff like this, and I'm not trying to scare anyone, but I had to put it somewhere because it keeps coming back to me, the memory, and everyone that I've told doesn't take me seriously. This happened when I was staying at my uncle's place in West Virginia. He lives way out there. No neighbors that you can see, no streetlights, just the woods on a gravel road. The first night, everything was normal, except it was too quiet. And you know when people say, like, it's quiet, but I mean nothing. No bugs, no frogs, nothing. It almost sounded like the sound was turned off. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I heard someone walking on the porch. Not footsteps pacing, but a slow, deliberate steps, like someone was almost counting them. I assumed it was my uncle because he gets up early and stays up late. I didn't check the time, though. Then I heard a whistling. It wasn't a song. It was like 2 notes over and over. It sounded really close, like right outside of the door. I didn't move. I just remember being told growing up, if you hear whistling in the night in the woods, no, you didn't. Don't answer it. Just leave it alone. The whistling stopped. Then I heard someone knock. One knock, then another. My uncle's bedroom door was open right down the hall. I peeked my head out and I could see him sleeping. That's when I really got scared. Because if it wasn't him, then who was it? I knew whoever was knocking knew that I was in there and that I was awake. And then the voice came next. It was a man's voice. The voice was calm, kind of friendly. He said my name, Jesse. He didn't yell it. He almost sounded like he was checking on me, like checking if I was home. I didn't know how he knew my name. He said it again. I didn't say anything. He said, "I just need you to open the door. You left something." I did not answer. I wasn't going to answer. After a minute, he said, "It's all right. I can wait." Again, very calm. The porch creaked like he took a step and sat down. I don't know how long he stayed there. Eventually, I fell asleep. And in the morning, my uncle asked me what I was doing outside so late. I told him I hadn't gone outside. And he asked me to come over and he showed me the porch. There were footsteps leading up to the door. Bare feet. The crazy thing was that they were big. They were double in size of mine, and they stopped right at the threshold. They didn't go back the way they came. I asked him if anyone had ever come around here at night, and he kind of got quiet, and he said, "You didn't talk to it, did you?" And I asked, "It? What's it?" He said, "Well, sometimes people hear whistling and knocking around this area. Sometimes it sounds like someone they know." He said it only happens if you're not from there. And I asked, "Well, what does it want?" And he said, "To be remembered." I left early from that trip. Here's the part that I can't explain. Ever since that night, there are gaps in my memory. Little things. A friend I know I was close to, but I can't remember why. A place I know I lived, but I can't picture it. And sometimes when I wake up, I have the same two notes, the whistling, stuck in my head, like someone's practicing, waiting for me to remember what I left outside.
I used to do house calls in the hills of the Appalachian Mountains. Many of my patients lived off the grid and did not have running water or electricity. And in many areas, I did not have cell phone service or GPS. So I would navigate to patients' homes using the compass in my car and a map. And the company that I worked for no longer exists. The company is gone. So many people have asked me, you've experienced some strange things. What was the thing that made it so you would not have gone back? And I'm going to tell you the story of my last day, where if the company had not been dissolving, I would not have gone back. On this particular day, I was finishing up my route. I'm going to see my last patient of the day, and I'm having a lot of trouble finding the residents. It was not uncommon for me to take routes that would lead me from like one state into another to get to the residence I was going in. For example, you can find yourself driving from Ohio through a part of West Virginia and back into Ohio to find a residence. There were also times where I would cut through routes in Wayne National Forest to kind of get back to the main route I was going to. It's all very complicated. I wish I could explain it better, but this is pertinent to the story. It also gives you an idea of how rural of an area I'm in. I'm not seeing houses, I am seeing trees, and I have already been lost. I'm trying to find my way back to the residence. I am driving through what I can only explain is a gravel road in the middle of the forest, and finally I see a mailbox that's literally mounted to a tree, and I'm looking around for a driveway. I'm not seeing one. I'm not seeing anywhere to go. It's just a mailbox, and then almost like a drop off into a ravine. So I pull over because I'm like, this is just not working out. I have no idea where I am. And I'm leaning over to look out of my car, and I see that down this steep slope down into this, I don't know, kind of ravine thing. You can see some water down there. At the bottom of the hill, there's like, I don't even know if you would call it a home built into the side of a hill. Now, had I been put in this situation where I was like, it might be a little dangerous going down into this ravine, in my little clogged shoes into this address I've never been before, maybe I wouldn't have gone, but I was much braver back in these days. So there's this gravel ravine that goes down, and I start to scale the side of it. I'm kind of like going sideways step by step. I've got my backpack on with my laptop and everything, and I'm making my way down. I finally get to the bottom of the hill. I walk over this little run of water, right? Making my way to the porch. There's a person sitting on the porch. They said, "I didn't know what time you were coming." And I said, "Well, I apologize. I am a bit late. I got lost." And they said, "You could have called." And I said, "I don't have service." And they looked at me and I looked at them, and they said, "Oh, all right." During the visit, they started explaining to me, how they live off the land, they hunt, they have no running water, they have no electricity, they bathe in the creek. This is about as rural off the grid gets. And then this person says to me, "You have really nice skin." Very kind. Appreciate that. Take very good care of my skin. I said, "Thank you very much." And they said, "It's very smooth." And I said, "I appreciate that. I take very good care of my skin." And they said, "You have children?" And I said, "I do." They said, "Do you have stretch marks?" Odd question. keep going with the visit, right? Because I'm not answering that question. What does it matter? Stop making me feel weird about it. I already don't love my stretch marks. We're not doing this. They come back. They say, do you have any stretch marks? I say, yeah, I do. Here and there. Lighthearted. Let's go. Let's keep talking. I need to get this visit done. Got a long climb back up to my car. And the person goes, you have about how much of your skin has stretch marks? And I said, I don't know. Not a whole lot. It's never really bothered me. We're going on with the visit. We're talking about medications. We're talking about why I came out to do the visit. And they said, still a lot of surface area of good skin. At which point I'm like, no, I don't, no, no, we're not doing this. So I quickly find a way to end the visit, because at this point I'm getting a little uncomfortable how this person's looking at me, talking about my skin, asking me personal questions about stretch marks and my children and such. This person is asking me why I'm in a hurry to go, and I'm trying to explain to them I have another visit, but it's getting late in the afternoon. They know I don't have another visit. I know I don't have another visit. So I'm explaining to them that, the company will track how long I'm at a person's house, and they'll reach out to me if I'm at a house for a specific period of time. And this person looks at me and says, you just told me you don't have service. Okay. Again, that was my second mistake. My first mistake was putting myself down in this ravine with this person. My second mistake was telling them that I didn't have service and I didn't have GPS and the satellite wasn't picking me up, because they know now I'm at the bottom of this ravine. I have no cell service. The GPS isn't tracking me because I have no service whatsoever. And this is my last visit of the day, because now it's 5, 6 o'clock at night. Because remember, I got lost and I got there late. So they know I have nowhere else to be. They're talking weird about my skin. I'm stuck at the bottom of this property. So I decide, you know what? I'm just going to gather my things. I'm going to start my way up the hill. I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to leave. I stand up to go. They say, hang on a minute. I did not hang on a minute. I grabbed my things. I start walking up the hill. It takes me a minute. And you'd think, well, you made it back to your car and you left. So what's the big deal? No. I found myself there, and now I'm having a hard time because it took me so long to get there and I was so lost. I had trouble getting back, and it's getting dark. Now, I've been driving quite some time. I am not finding the main route, and I'm getting very concerned because it's getting dark. So a truck pulls around and it looks like it's going to go around me. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have service. I'm just going to put down my window and ask this person if they can point me in the direction of the nearest route. Or I've even had people say hey, follow me. I'll take you to the nearest route. People are honestly so nice, and I've been so grateful because so many people have turned me around and put me back, where I'm supposed to be when I get lost. So this truck looks like it's going to pull around me. I put down my window because I'm ready to ask them, can you point me in the direction of the nearest main road? Guess who's in the truck? Yeah, it was the person whose house I just left. So imagine that. At this point, my anxiety goes from I'm already lost in the woods to a 10, where I'm about to fall out of my skin. At this point, I just assume that I'm being followed. No, absolutely not. I drove on that gravel road until I found a paved road, and then I followed the paved road to a main route, and then I took the main route until I had GPS service, and then the GPS took me home. So it all worked out in the end, but that was it's a horrible experience.
I'll tell you an Appalachian ghost story that my grandpa has passed down to me from his mother's house. So my great-grandmother, they actually owned a giant classic plantation home that was in Gainesboro, Tennessee, right next to Roaring River. This plantation home had actually been a hospital in the Civil War era. That was a neutral hospital for both Northern and Southern soldiers. You can imagine with all the deaths that happened here and things that followed it. There is a famous private cemetery behind it called the Gore Family Cemetery, and it is the same Gores as Al Gore and General Gore and all the different famous Gores that are involved with that. When he was little and he lived there, he would frequently go visit the cemetery back there. It was always real spooky and creepy looking because anytime it would rain, or it's right next to the river, or if the weather had changed, it would fog up right around that cemetery. And his mother actually asked him why he liked to go down there and play so much. And he said, well, I don't have any other friends up here, and the little girl in the cemetery always likes me to play with her. And at this, my Granny Maud, which was his mother's name, was terrified because she knew very well about the property, and she was Irish. Their original name was O'Cassidy, last name O'Cassidy. And so they knew of all like the fae and the folklores of like the spirits and stuff. And if you all know about like spirits and trapping, the rivers serve as a boundary. So when you have a cemetery right next to a river, it is supposed to have a lot of activity because the spirits can't move away from the graveyard because the river traps them there. That goes back a long, long, long ways if you want to look into that. So he would frequent the cemetery as a little boy to play with the girl that he said he could always see in the cemetery. And she was always in the fog wanting to play there. This gives me chills knowing how my grandpa was a doctor. Like he was very, very, very serious. He, military doctor, served at, state that he was a very serious, very intelligent, very smart man. But he could remember this clear as day, the little girl in the cemetery. And I just can't imagine, getting to see, I grew up going to that house and seeing that cemetery. I could not imagine going out there by myself, like at all, especially if I saw a little girl out there. I would not be able to handle it. But, it just goes back to kids don't have that veil that adults do. So maybe the adults in the area couldn't see it. This was just one of many stories. That area was very well known to have a lot of disembodied voices, a lot of what people call ghost lights. And I can't imagine with all that death from the Civil War, what was around that area. Another famous story from that area is one night the whole family was woken by this groaning noise. They tried to find the source of this groaning noise, and imagine this house only has electricity in the central room, and it's huge. It's like a mansion, and they're having to walk around with like candle lights trying to figure out where this noise is coming from. And this disembodied voice of this groaning just down the hallways into the different rooms. It went into the attic at some point, and then it eventually faded outside. And guess where it wound up at? It wound up at that cemetery. And it gives me chills talking about that because I've been there. I've walked those halls a million times, and that place always gave me the creeps.
Tonight, my husband followed me deep into the woods, but it was not me. Typically, everyone knows do not whistle in the woods, right? Well, my husband whistled in the woods today, and let me tell you what happened. We went looking for the cemetery that I found the other day with my cousins, and we were going to do like a session out there with the REM pod and use a metal detector and just see what all we could find. I set up my actual vlogging camera and was using my phone to record some things, and Jason was walking around the area using the metal detector, and then that's when he wandered off a little bit. I decided to just use my vlogging camera and then switch my phone to the Spirit Talker and see if I could get anything because I was only getting a little bit with the REM pod, but it started talking a lot. Here's some of the things that it said. So I started off by just asking it like what had happened out there, things like that. So it was saying so much heartache, and then shall I do something? And then I asked who was talking to me, and it said Colin. I said, are you young or old? It told me that it was old. And then out of nowhere it says go further. So I'm confused, and I say, do you want me to go further to the right or to the left? And then it told me that we were family. So I'm like, okay, because I knew that my family had owned the land for like 123 years, 24 years. And then it said avoid Patricia, right? Which didn't really make any sense. So I was confused, but now I know who Patricia is. When Jason first wandered off, I heard him whistle, and I'm like, oh my God, why would he whistle? And then I'm like, maybe that wasn't him. Maybe it's just a whistle I heard. Go about my business. I don't worry about it. Well, about 30 minutes goes by, and Jason comes back. I hear like the lock on the truck sound from like far off. Jason had left his phone at home, so it was just him and the metal detector out in the woods. He comes up, and normally he does not get like shaken or frazzled about anything, but I could tell that he was like visibly like disturbed. That's when he told me that he heard me turn the REM pod on, so he decided to wander off a little bit. Well, he had turned to the left, and then when he turned back to the right, he saw me walking further into the woods. Now, remember, the Spirit Talker said further, go further. So he thought that I just started wandering around because that's the woods I kind of grew up in. He had never been out there before, not even once. So he starts following me, right? So he follows me, and then I kind of like duck behind a tree, and then he notices that the ground, there's like a big like ravine type thing. And then he sees me the whole time. He said I had a black coat on with my hood up, which I did. And he said that he saw me on the other side of the ravine. So then he thought, okay, Something's messing with me. I've got to get back to where she actually is. This isn't her. You could hear the freeway, but he said that it sounded like it was all around him and he couldn't pinpoint the direction. It's cloudy outside. The sun wasn't out. He couldn't really tell where to go. And remember, he didn't have his phone. So he just decides to walk in one direction, and then he just figures he'll either run into me or run into a house or something. And then he sees me again. It's like I was trying to take him back to where I was originally leading him. So he just ignored me and kept going in the direction that he was going. I had not moved the entire time since we got out there because I was terrified that if I wandered off just a little bit, I would get completely disoriented and lost because of the thicket. This is what it looked like out there. There's the REM pod, but see how thick the woods are? It was like that, just surround all the way around. The only reason this is a clearing is because this is where the graves are. Stopped recording when Jason walked up, but the spirit talker was still going on my phone. And then this is what it said. He comes up and he's kind of out of breath, and it says breath here. That I don't even really want to talk about it anymore because I don't know what's going on. It's kind of making me nervous. And it said, keep going, as she scares me. Jason said, I don't even know like whose land this is or like what's going on out here. And I was like, it's my grandfather's land. And then he said, this is my land. Like this thing was trying to get us to come deeper into the woods the entire time.
A lot of people wonder, what are the weird things that happen in the Appalachian Mountains? Well, this is one of those stories. Now, David, he grew up on the West Coast, but his grandmother lived in West Virginia. And he would often come and visit her and stay with her for like a week or two. And he said every time he'd go to his grandma's house, at nighttime she'd start panicking and she'd want to close all of her windows, put the curtain shut, and she would put crucifix on all of the window sills. Now, he just thought, that was because they were sort of very religious and it was such a, religious place. And he didn't think much about it. Well, later on in life, he ends up buying his grandmother's house and he moves in. Well, he said after living there for, 4 or 5 weeks, he kind of got settled into his new life, living up in the mountains. And he said everything was going great until one night he hears a knock at the door. So he goes to the front door. And when he opens the door, he is stunned to see his grandma. And she's like, David, let me in. It's cold out here. Come on, David, just let me come in. And he goes, Grandma, like, wait, you're not my grandma. Like, you're not real. You're not alive. Like, how are you here? And so he closed the door and like locks it and is like, no, I'm not letting her in. Well, he keeps hearing her all night, knocking on the door. He doesn't answer. Next night, she comes back again, knocking on the door. And he looks out the window. He can see it's his grandmother. Everything is identical. The way she talks, the way she moves, her mannerisms, everything. Next night, she comes back again. And for like 2 weeks in a row, every night at the same time, she'd be at the door, banging, wanting him to let her in. And he said finally, he remembered what his grandmother would do. And so that night, he closed up all the windows. He hit the curtains closed, and he locked the front door. Then he took some of these small crucifixes of that were used to be his grandmother's, and he put them on every windowsill. And then he put it on top of the doorway. So that night, he doesn't hear a knock at the door. But all of a sudden, he hears boom, 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 knocking coming from one of the windows. And when he pulls the curtain over, it's his grandmother saying, "David, let me in, please. It's cold. Let me in." And he realized, wait a second, I didn't put a crucifix on this window. So every night for the whole time that he lived there for like 2 years, he at night would lock everything up, close the curtains, and put crucifixes on all the windows.
Since it's a trend right now for people to share their creepy and unexplainable stories, I figured I'd share one of mine. For starters, I was born, raised, and still live in the Appalachian Mountains. Even further, I was raised on land that was passed down through generations since the 1800s. And there have been tales and stories of this land being haunted since even back then. My great-great-great-grandparents' home is still standing that they used newspapers for insulation in. It was built in, I think, like 1886. And when I was a child, I used to have recurring nightmares about that cabin and just the land in general. So I remember in one of the dreams, I would always be like being chased by something. I never knew what was chasing me, but I was always running from something. In my dream, the cabin was like a brand new cabin. It's not like it is now. But I would run in there trying to hide, and everywhere I would try to hide, there was just skeletons everywhere. I'm talking thousands of skeletons. Like I tried to hide under the bed, but there was just bones. I opened a closet door and skeletons fell out. I would even try crawling under the cabin, but it was just skeletons everywhere. This used to really scare me as a child, so I was super scared of that cabin. But in the front yard of that cabin, I would have another recurring dream. But in this dream, everything was black and white except for my cousin. We were like 5 and 6 years old probably. But she was in like a purple, vibrant old ladies church outfit. I'm talking dress, button-up shirt with a skirt and hat. And she was like crying, mourning over 2 tombstones. I would ask her what she was doing or if she was okay, and she just would not respond to me. She was just crying, like grieving over these graves. Like I said, the graves were in the front yard of the old cabin. Well, now my aunt's house is built. She built a beautiful log home right where I used to dream those tombstones were. It gets even crazier. Just wait. Under my aunt's porch, she has so many mushrooms popping up that look like fingers. I don't know how else to put it. Just they look like fingers. Hang on, I'll show you. Okay, this is a picture I took of them. Tell me these do not look like fingers. And there's a lot of them, like in abundance, right where I used to dream there were people buried. And now there's fingers popping up. I think the proper name for them is actually dead man's fingers. So that's just so creepy. Look how many there are.
I'm just telling you this story for your own safety, but if you are out in Appalachia at night alone, do not leave your tent, do not leave your cabin, do not leave your home. This story is terrifying. If you're watching this at night, I would just save it and watch it again in the morning because it is really scary. This story comes from a girl named Sam. She lived out on the West Coast, but she loved being outdoors and had always wanted to hike up the Blue Ridge Parkway and go camping in Appalachia. She drove the whole way with her tent because she wanted to stop at different points along the Appalachia Trail and hike. She was driving down the Blue Ridge Parkway in western North Carolina when she said she got an Amber Alert on her phone for a small child that had went missing in that area. She took note of the Amber Alert, like what the child was last seen wearing, all of that stuff, but she just continued to drive until she got to her campsite. The area she decided to camp in for the night was in a very remote location. There wasn't any other campers nearby or anything like that, but that's how she liked it. She wanted to be just by herself. She had started a fire, ate some dinner, and then decided she was just going to go into her tent for the night and get ready for bed. She said she was almost asleep when she heard from out in the distance a child screaming and crying. She was paralyzed with fear in her tent, but that's when she remembered the Amber Alert. She unzipped her tent. She peeked out, looked around, didn't see anything. She said the woods were oddly quiet and she just felt this overwhelming sense of heaviness. It was pitch black, so she got her flashlight and kind of shone it through the woods. Everything again, super quiet. The crying had stopped. So she just turned off her flashlight, went back inside and zipped up her tent. Laid back down, and as she was getting ready to fall asleep, she heard the screaming again. She couldn't stop thinking about the Amber Alert and thought that this might be connected to that. However, she did not have cell phone signal, so she got in her cart and drove out into the main road about 15 minutes away to find an area where she could call the police. When she found an area with cell phone signal, she phoned the police, let them know that she had heard this screaming out in the woods, couldn't tell what direction it came from, but let them know where her campsite was and where she kind of heard it. It was then that police told her that the Amber Alert had been resolved and they had found the missing child. She drove back to her campsite, but she said the moment that she got there, things just felt really off. Her tent was zipped up as she had left it, but when she unzipped the tent, her belongings were strewn all about the tent. She said her sleeping bag was wadded up in the corner. Her belongings were taken all out of her bag and just all over the tent. She had her wallet with some cash in there. It wasn't taken, but it was just thrown across the tent. Nothing was stolen. Something had just came in and made a mess of her tent. Now, I would say this could be an animal that came in there looking for food. But how was the tent zipped up? An animal can't unzip, get in, and then leave and zip the tent back. And if it was a human trying to rob her, why didn't they take her money? Why didn't they take anything? Sam does not waste any time. She is just grabbing her stuff to pack it all away so that she can get out of there. She was getting ready to take down her tent when she started hearing the screaming again coming from the woods. And that's when she decides to just leave her tent and get in her car and drive away.
Sometimes they come knocking. If you felt that chill down your spine, it's already too late. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more content. And as always, stay safe, stay aware, and question everything.